Yes, 5 videos into my stellar YouTube career, and I am already making a tier list video. Hey everyone, got something a little bit different today. I noticed there wasn't a huge amount of tier list or ranking content for Umineko, so I decided to branch out from video essays and make this. Today I'm going to be ranking the 8 main episodes of Umineko, so not including any side stories or extra content or anything like that. Now, obviously, my opinions are not red truth, they're opinions. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible, but at the end of the day, I'm just saying my personal favourites, so don't take any of my opinions or stupid jokes too seriously. I'm going to go in order through the 8 episodes of Umineko, mentioning something I really liked in each one, something I disliked in each one, any big highlight moments or character arcs that stood out to me in the episode, that sort of thing. We've got 4 main tiers. My Umineko themed stand-in for S tier is appropriately the Golden Land. Then we have the Great tier, the Good tier, and the Still Good, but I have to rank some stuff lower tier. As the last name suggests, there aren't any episodes of Umineko that I totally dislike. The quality of the writing and plotting is pretty high across the board in this series, so I'm not necessarily calling any of these episodes bad, I just have to make judgment calls somewhere. I should also point out that the first time I read Umineko was in manga form, but I've since gone back and either played or watched a lot of the series in visual novel form as well, so I'm going to try and talk about both adaptations in this tier list. Finally, this video will contain spoilers. Lots and lots of spoilers. So yeah, let's jump straight in. Okay, starting off with episode 1, Legend of the Golden Witch, the one that started it all. I remember reading the first scene of Umineko really clearly, watching a wealthy old dude cry about some random person called Beatrice, and wondering what the hell was going on. Anyway, I kind of feel bad about this placement, because again, I don't think there's a huge amount wrong with Legend of the Golden Witch, but I am going to have to put episode 1 in bottom tier. I don't think anyone will disagree with me when they say that the opening to Umineko is pretty slow, even compared to other works by 7th expansion. I honestly feel like Higurashi does a better job of really grabbing your attention right out of the gates with its quietly unsettling atmosphere in Hinamizawa. Umineko only really gets going late in episode 1, and because this series is a pastiche of the Golden Age mystery genre, Rikishi has to spend a lot of time setting up these really familiar tropes and caricatures before he can start to dissect and deconstruct them. I think the episode does a great job of introducing all the characters and plot devices, and it probably has some of the most effective moments of horror in the whole series. Obviously, the very first Twilight, super iconic, especially in the visual novel when you hear Golden Slaughterer for the first time in the background, and the way Rikishi uses Maria as a character here is super creepy and effective. The moment when you enter the murder scene in the lounge and find Maria just facing the wall Blair Witch Project style is eerie as hell, and I also love the moment where Natsuhi goes to confront Beatrice for the first time. Still, our first sign of the meta world and Beatrice herself only arrives in episode 1 Tea Party, and those meta world scenes are what makes Umineko really special, in my opinion. So for me, episode 1 goes in the still good, but I need to rank some stuff lower tier. Moving on to episode 2, Turn of the Golden Witch. You're probably going to start noticing a theme in these rankings, namely a theme of the question arcs generally appearing a little lower in the rankings than the answer arcs. There is a big exception to that, which I'll get to, but unfortunately Turn of the Golden Witch doesn't really buck that trend, and I'm still going to have to put it in bottom tier. Again, I don't think there's a huge amount wrong with Turn of the Golden Witch, but Umineko was still getting into its stride in these early arcs, and so inevitably a lot of the best moments and set pieces just come later in the series. We spend a lot of time on character development here, particularly with the Shan and Cannon duo and their romantic interests, George and Jessica. Rose and Maria get a ton of attention here as well, culminating in that hilarious and strangely epic moment where Maria ends up loading Rose's Winchester for her. I mean, screw Disneyland, if that's not a wholesome mother-daughter bonding moment, then I don't know what is. This is also the start of Battler and Beatrice's twisted battle of logic, which is great, but it's also kind of the height of Battler's infamous incompetence. He's still mostly at a loss as to the rules of the game in Turn of the Golden Witch, and so Beatrice spends most of the time running rings around him, which isn't great for old Battler. Still, similar to episode 1, this is one of the strongest arcs for horror, and as a fan of horror, that's definitely not a bad thing. The goat henchmen are really creepy here, as is seeing Beatrice's scene of almost total victory where she drags Battler around on a damn chain. This builds up into the banquet scene, which really has Titus Andronicus levels of gore and black comedy. Also, episode 2 sees the proper introduction of Lambda Delta, fan favourite character in the series obviously. The Burncastle Lambda Delta pairing are a really nice allusion to Higurashi, and that's one of the little details which really makes Umineko work as a series, I think. There's still a lot of strengths here actually, enough for me to nearly consider putting it in good tier, but compared to the strength of other arcs in Umineko, I still think Turn of the Golden Witch loses out overall. So yeah, this one joins Legend of the Golden Witch in the still good, but I need to rank some stuff lower tier. Right, here we go, we're really getting to the meat of the series here. Next up, episode 3, Banquet of the Golden Witch. At this point, Ryokishi has got the majority of the setup out of the way. Characters, down. Rokujima Massacre, down. Logic Battle, down. Red Truth, down. Most of the major pieces are in their place now. And because of that, Banquet of the Golden Witch really represents the apex of the question arcs and of the Battle of Beatrice Logic Battle era of Umineko. You've probably already realised that I'm going to rank this episode highly, and yeah, I am, because Banquet of the Golden Witch is epic. I wouldn't say this is the absolute best episode of Umineko, but for me it's definitely up there. And furthermore, it's one of the definitive episodes for me in terms of how I perceive the series. Lots of people's favourite aspect of Umineko is the relationship logic battle between Battle and Beatrice, and I don't think many will argue that this aspect is never better than it is in Banquet. We see the introduction of staples like Devil's Proof and Hempel's Raven in this episode, all of which get used to great and convoluted effect. My absolute favourite part of these logic battles is how one of the sides can just say, I refuse to explain. It just makes the whole argument come across like a stupid 4chan debate, and I love it. Also, Banquet is the first episode of the series that really explores magic as a concept in depth. The vase motif and the way it's used throughout the plot of episode 4 is really interesting, I think, as is the character of Eva and her meta-world equivalent, Beatrice, who was entertaining as hell at the time, and although later villains in the series would surpass her, I still think she works excellently in Banquet and reflects perfectly on Eva as a character. Like I said, this episode is much heavier on magic than the first two, and has some of the most unabashedly shonen moments in the series. The magic battles in Umineko can sometimes be a mixed bag, I feel, but I really like the ones in Banquet, especially because at this point they were still something of a novelty. The battle between Virgilia and Beatrice in the Rose Garden is a real mid-episode highlight, although I will say I actually think this moment is better served in the manga than it is in the visual novel. Although I love the OST and the atmosphere of the magic fights in the VN, I just don't think the format suits these kind of epic confrontations very well. Essentially the only way they can express the violence of the battle is with some sound cues and sprite transitions, whereas in the manga this confrontation feels so much more dynamic and explosive. The artwork provides a much stronger sense of movement and space, which, combined with the insane character of those Beatrice expressions, just works for a better presentation of the fight overall, I think. Also, goddammit, this is another part that would have been so good in a proper anime adaptation, and I really hope Umineko gets one someday. Moving on with Banquet, we really need to talk about the ending. The revelation that Beatrice has been faking her change of heart throughout the course of episode 3 is a quintessential Umineko twist, and probably the first time I personally was really sold on the direction of the series. It's just such a fun and crushing reveal. This sight of the Golden Land, of the potential happy ending, and the way Ryokishi just pulls the rug out from under us is genius, and really caps off the paciest and most emotionally engaging episode so far. That followed with the what the fuck who is this of Anji's dramatic entrance means that episode 3 has easily one of the best finales, tea parties in the series, and is more than enough for me to rate it highly. Now, I did think about putting Banquet in great tier, because again, a lot of the answer arcs are really strong, but I think the fact that this is the peak of the Battle of Beatrice Battle of Wits, and the best of the question arcs for me, means it deserves to be higher than that. So, Banquet of the Golden Witch is going to be the first episode in the Golden Land tier. Without a doubt, Banquet slaps. Right, rounding off the question arcs, we have episode 4, Alliance of the Golden Witch. This is one of the hardest episodes to rank, I feel, because even more so than the other question arcs, I think Alliance suffers from the inevitable lack of answers and clarity that we get at the conclusion. Episode 3 felt like it was allowed to shine because of all the setup and the character development in the first 2 episodes. But the introduction of Anji, who, don't get me wrong, would later prove to be one of Umineko's most inspired characters, means that the opening sections of episode 4 are again dominated by backstory and character development. We go through Anji's personal history with magic, and Maria's magic sorcière, as well as the future state of the Ishiramiya family affairs and her bargain with Bunker Stell, all of which is extremely important, but this means that it takes a long time for the episode's Rokujima game board section to even start. Also, when it does, I wouldn't say this is the most memorable of the game board plots. It does have some really fun set pieces. I like the trials of George, Jessica and Battler for succession to the family headship. Again, they're all super shonen in style, which makes the fake outs of George and Jessica dying so brutally despite their best efforts particularly savage. Extra points go to Kraus for just right hooking one of the goat henchmen in the face. Funny moments aside though, I would say this episode only really catches fire right at the end, when we get to Battler's headship trial, and his climactic confrontation with Beatrice. But while the peak of this episode does take a while to arrive, when it does, damn does it arrive. This encounter with Beatrice staring down at Battler from the balcony, rain pouring down, and the way her expression turns unexpectedly serious and mournful gave me chills on first read and still does now. Afterwards, Beatrice's refusal to finish the game and her removing Battler's opponent qualification on the basis of him not being Asumu's son is some classic Red Truth fuckery and a twist that really made my jaw drop at the time. Then of course we get the iconic final confrontation of the question arcs between Battler and Beatrice. It is a bit ironic that this scene is probably better known for the small bombs meme than it is for the scene itself, which, don't get me wrong, will never not be funny, and sometimes I do need to remind myself that this is actually a theory Battler canonically proposed, and not something a fan invented as a joke. But even without the small bombs nonsense, this would still have to go down as a definitive Umineko scene, and I especially love the way it ends on the question which has been on all of our minds for all of the question arcs. Who is the Golden Witch Beatrice? So, in regards to ranking Alliance of the Golden Witch, it's tough. It's actually really tough. I don't think it's quite great tier. Like I said, I do think this episode has a slow opening, even by Umineko standards, and we don't see the full fruits of Anji's character development until episode 8, really. So, yeah, I'm going to put this in good tier, I think. It might be a bit harsh, but I think this is a good spot for Alliance as a whole. So now, moving on to the answer arcs of Umineko, we have episode 5, End of the Golden Witch. This is a good one. As to why End of the Golden Witch is so good, it's very, very simple. Furuno goddamn Erika. She's the character that every Umineko fan loves to hate, parody of the detective character, self-proclaimed intellectual rapist, and world's most sincere lover of duct tape. It's crazy how much a good villain can really invigorate a series. In the first few chapters of episode 5, I was really worried that the relative absence of Beatrice in the narrative would make for a bit of a vacuum, because she's such a crucial and larger-than-life presence in the question arcs. I probably wouldn't have carried on reading this series past episode 1 if it wasn't for Beatrice. But I didn't need to be worried, because Erika and BANQUET really step up here to make the episode just as high stakes and entertaining as before. I think what people, including myself, really love about Erika, other than the pantomime villain aspect, is the fact that she's a character who could only exist in the ridiculous, over-the-top, metatextual mess that is Umineko. There's not much I can say about Erika that a lot of people haven't said before, but yeah, she's a great character, a great villain, and a big part of what makes episode 5 so entertaining. The surprising part is that when I was thinking about End of the Golden Witch, even without Erika, this is a top tier episode, I think. I like the game board mystery plot on Rokkenshima Island. I think the one here is up there with the best in the series. I really like the focus on Natsuhi, who's a personal favourite of mine from the Ishiro family cast, and I love the prospect of the menacing voice that she hears over the phone, and the way this links into Umineko's canonical manga solution, so to speak. I always felt an unusually high amount of sympathy for Natsuhi. I don't know if this is the case for everyone else, but I thought she was a really interesting character right from episode 1 onwards, so I personally really enjoyed the extra attention she got in episode 5. It's also really satisfying to see the family epitaph finally solved for the first time in this episode, let alone all the other great scenes. I'm not going to list all of them, because again there is a lot, but from a Battler Beatrice perspective, I love the scene where they prove that Kinzo could have escaped from the locked room by jumping through the window. Hilarious that all the family members just accept this, by the way. And then of course there's the hidden tea party. The first usage of the golden truth in the series is such a highlight. Baffling and shonen and very, very anime, which you always like to see. Just watching Battler come to terms with the real meaning of Beatrice's game, and using it to overcome Erika when he thought it was all over, just feels like the culmination of his and Beatrice's whole relationship, and it's super satisfying to read. For me, End of the Golden Witch is an easy Golden Land tier. It's going to be joining Banquet of the Golden Witch right up there at the top. Next up, we have another slice of Furuno Erika in episode 6, Dawn of the Golden Witch. Now, my ranking of this episode might feel a bit arbitrary on the face of it, because episode 5 and 6 are some of the most interconnected episodes in the series, and feel kinda interchangeable sometimes. There's a lot of continuity here, with the logic battle primarily being between Erika and Battler/Beatrice in both. And to be honest, I could very easily rank Dawn of the Golden Witch as top tier as well. It is really good, but there are reasons why I think that episode 5 is stronger overall. But first off, I'll talk about the strengths. Dawn of the Golden Witch both starts and finishes really, really well. I love the opening hook of seeing Erika and Battle together at the marriage altar. Compared to the slower start of some previous Umineko episodes, this is one that just jumps straight into it, and already you're dying to find out how the hell we managed to get into this wild situation. Then, seeing the conclusion of this setup at the end is fantastic. The scene delivers on pretty much every front, while also being Umineko at its most theatrical and ridiculous. Beatrice's return in full cackling glory is brilliant. My god, how we missed her in this episode, by the way. Erika is hysterical, Bunker, Stell, and Lambda watching on are great. The whole scene just has a chaotic, indulgent energy, which is kind of irresistible to read for me. I mean, it ends on a James Bond-style gunshot, while simultaneously confirming the long-standing Shannon canon theory. It's so good I forgot to care that the Birth of the New Witch song sounds uncomfortably like Remember the Name by Fort Minor, and that says it all, really. When an episode starts and ends as well as this, it's definitely going to be rated highly. The middle section is what's holding Dawn of the Golden Witch back from being top tier, though, in my opinion. Honestly, the main thing wrong with the middle sections of episode 6, I think, is actually Battler. This is not a good episode for him, at all. It might even be his lowest point as a character in the whole series. Something I find really funny about Umineko is that if you really think about it, 90% of the series' plot is premeditated on Battler making a terrible decision. Now, this is funny most of the time, and in the question arcs it's justifiable because Battler hasn't really learned the rules of the game yet, and his loyalty towards his family holds him back from condemning them, which would sometimes help his argument. But up to episode 6, we've been seeing him develop, getting better at the game each time, and in episode 5 he hits this real high point when he finally comes to understand Beatrice's game, essentially defeats Erika although it gets called as a draw, and even progresses to the point of Game Master. Because of that, I was expecting to see Battler at his most competent, which makes it really disappointing when all of that character development kind of gets thrown out the window and instead we see him at his most incompetent. Like I said, a lot of Umineko's plot is based around Battler making bad decisions, but in episode 6 it feels more like 99%, honestly. The game board he comes up with is pretty obviously full of holes, which Erika easily exploits, and his decision to let her use duct tape and relinquish her detective status is questionable to say the least. Even if he didn't think she would be as savage as to go around killing his family members, he should have known Erika wouldn't make a request if it wasn't to her obvious advantage. It's frustratingly naive, and again, to me it felt like Battler shouldn't have been making those kind of obvious oversight mistakes anymore. The other thing about Battler in this episode is his treatment of the resurrected Beatrice. I can understand his disappointment that she isn't the same Beatrice as before, but the way he acts towards her is weirdly cruel and unnecessary, almost to the point of feeling a bit out of character at times. So yeah, despite the amazing opening and ending to this episode, and the energy that Erika and the eventually revived Beatrice bring, there is some pretty annoying stuff in this episode too, I think, which means I'm going to end up putting Dawn of the Golden Witch in Great tier instead of Golden Land tier. Yeah, Great tier instead of Golden Land tier. I think this is the right spot. Okay, episode 7, Requiem of the Golden Witch, is up next, the penultimate episode of the series. So this might be one of the more controversial rankings in this tier list. I know a lot of people really love Requiem of the Golden Witch, and some people even say it's the best episode, which I have a hard time understanding, because my honest opinion is that episode 7 is definitely the weakest of the answer arcs. The way I justify this discrepancy is that when people talk about how much they love episode 7, it seems to me what they're really saying is how much they love the ending of episode 7. Which is undoubtedly 10 out of 10, and I'll talk more about how good the ending is later because don't get me wrong, it is really good. But I feel like people forget about the rest of the episode when they talk about Requiem, which apart from a few exceptions, I thought was a bit of a chore to read at times, honestly. First of all, we're coming off such a big climax of tension and character development from episode 5 and 6, which means the opening of episode 7 immediately feels like a bit of a hangover from that. In addition, we're introduced to two completely new characters in Willard and Leon, which means the pace of the episode has to slow down to an absolute crawl for us to get to know them. This isn't really the episode's fault, because that character development is important. Willard and Leon are by no means bad characters, but the lack of Beatrice and Battler and of any continuity from recent episodes just made the opening of episode 7 feel like a drag to me. The amount of repetition in this section doesn't help either. I mean, at this point everyone knows that Shannon and Cannon are the same person. Going over it again here just felt like needless repetition. The one saving grace is the flashback section where we dip into Kinzo's past and see the encounter between the Japanese and the Italians. This whole section is fantastic and actually one of the most thematically important sections in the whole game. I love the writing in this, I love the foreshadowing, I love the allusions to Dante's Divine Comedy, I love the emotional impact. It's one of the best written sections of Umineko bar none, not just in Requiem. And then again, we get to the ending of episode 7 and the tea party. On this, I totally agree with the consensus. The whole ending is pure Umineko, from the horror of Anji's crushing death, to the catharsis of watching Willard tear down the mysteries of previous episodes, to the sheer menace factor of Bunker with the executioner playing in the background. So yeah, Requiem of the Golden Witch is a pivotal piece of the puzzle for sure, but I find its weaknesses much harder to overlook than other fans of the series, I think. It's obviously not bottom tier. The tea party and the Kinzo section are way too good for that, but I don't think it's quite great tier either. So I'm going to put it in good tier, along with Alliance of the Golden Witch. Right then, here we are. At last, we've arrived at the ending. Episode 8, Twilight of the Golden Witch, or as I like to call it, Umineko Endgame. If I had to describe Twilight of the Golden Witch to someone who hadn't read it, I would describe it as a lot. There's just a lot of things happening, constantly. I think Umineko Endgame is a good description, but maybe that doesn't even cut it. Twilight of the Golden Witch is Umineko's Smash Ultimate. Everyone is here, and you're going to see them doing the thing that they did the last time you saw them, because fan service. Lots and lots of fan service. I'll be real with you, even if I'm a fan of the series in question, I usually hate the whole let's reel out every fan favourite character thing just because. It's one of the most annoying kinds of fan service for me because I feel like it often overpowers the narrative itself and leaves you wondering what you're actually supposed to be focusing on. Like I said, there's just so much stuff happening in Twilight of the Golden Witch. All of the family members are here, and all of the witches are here too, and oh, Eva Trici is here as well, and oh, Erica is a pirate now for some reason. It's overstuffed and way too indulgent for sure, but somehow, in spite of all of this, Twilight of the Golden Witch manages to hold together and deliver a really emotionally satisfying conclusion. Don't get me wrong, Anji Ushiramiya carries this episode. If we didn't have that emotional connection to anchor us, Twilight would have fallen apart under its own weight very early. But because of all of the, quite frankly, nonsense going on at the fringes of the episode is grounded in her character arc, it still managed to keep my interest. In many ways, Anji is the ultimate audience surrogate. The way she comes to understand the nature of magic and the events of the Rokkenshima massacre reflects our own journey to understanding of the same elements. Because of that, despite all the things that on paper I should have really disliked about this episode, I ended up loving it anyway. Twilight delivers on the most important levels a story can deliver, which is character and themes for me. So I really can't complain that much about the fan service. I could talk about the thematic resolution we get in episode 8 all day, but to be honest, that is a series of videos in itself, and I need to keep things moving, so I'm going to focus on the all-important scene. You already know what I'm talking about. Alexa, play Ricordando il Passato. Remember I mentioned earlier that I first read Umineko in manga form? I think this lends me an interesting perspective on the sequence, as famously the manga presents a much more in-depth and fully rendered version of this scene than the visual novel. Now, I actually love both versions. I certainly don't resent Ryukishi's decision to withhold the full truth, as I think it's very much in the spirit of Umineko as a story, and I think it's the right creative choice overall. It's sort of the true ending of the story as I see it, I guess. On the other hand, I am a little bit happy that I chose to read the manga version first, because in the manga, the Confession of the Golden Witch section, building into the Ricordando scene is... I mean, there aren't really any words, it's beyond an emotional gut punch. This panel right here, when they kiss, and then it cuts back to show Battler on the motorboat alone, it immediately hit me what's going to happen. I'd kind of been huffing copium that it wouldn't happen up till then, despite knowing deep down that it would. And yeah, like every other reader, this scene destroyed me. I didn't really know what to do with myself for the rest of the day. I just kept rereading that scene, seeing the culmination of all these hours I'd spent reading this damn manga series, and thinking how insane that for one scene on its own, all of those hours are completely and utterly justified. It's an astonishing sequence, and when I look back on Umineko as a series, like everyone else, this is the moment I'm always going to remember. So Twilight of the Golden Witch, it's undoubtedly the hardest episode to rank. I could easily put it in Golden tier for the mere fact it provided an emotionally satisfying conclusion to such a complex, eccentric and esoteric series, but I also can't overlook the episode's indulgences, so it's going to have to level out in great tier, I think. I laboured over this one for a long time, not gonna lie, but I think this is the right spot. So, a quick final recap. In the still good, but I need to rank some stuff lower tier, we have episode 1 and episode 2. In the good tier, we have episode 4 and episode 7. In the great tier, we have episode 5 and 8. And then capping things off with the Golden tier, we have episode 3 and episode 5, my personal favourites. So, there we go. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe and tell me your own favourites in the comments. Are there any episodes I underrated? Are there any that I overrated? Can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts, and again, thanks for watching.